this is Stephen Bedard, and thank you for coming to my YouTube channel. And I hope that you've already hit that subscribe button. If you haven't, make sure to do that right now. Now, there are a number of roles in my life. I am a pastor, I'm a military chaplain, I am an author, a blogger, a sometime teacher. Apparently, I'm a YouTuber now too. But there's one role in my life that really helps to shape most of the other things that I do, and that is my role as an autism dad. Now, it's actually kind of controversial whether it is even appropriate for someone to identify as an autism dad, but that's a subject for another video. I'm not going to get into that right now. I'm just going to say that my relationship with my two children who have autism looks significantly different than my relationship with my other children who do not have autism. Now, I love all five of them equally, but my experience as an autism dad is unique in terms of the other relationships and roles that I have. What I want to do in this video is to share a little bit about my experience as an autism dad. And I really can't go into everything right now, and I hope to do a number of different videos on different aspects of what it's like to experience autism. But what I'm going to do now is just share a little bit about how we found out our children had autism, what it was like, and basically just to give you a snapshot of what it is like to raise children with autism. So I want to take you back to the year 2000, and I can't believe it was that long ago, but back then my wife Amanda and I got married. Obviously she wasn't my wife before we got married, but we got married. And I'll tell you, when we got married, I had some ideas of what life was going to look like. Obviously, I didn't know everything. I didn't know every detail. But I had some expectations, some goals for what life would look like, what raising children would look like. And I thought we were just going to have a pretty normal family. Of course, that didn't happen. Not even close did we get to normal family. Not that I know that a normal family even exists, but it was an interesting experience for us. Unfortunately, our first child we lost in a miscarriage, and that was very, very difficult. And perhaps that's something I could talk about one day as well. But we did want to have a family, and so it wasn't long after that before my wife got pregnant again, and we were very excited about this. This is going to be great. I had trouble even imagining what it was going to be like to be a dad. I had all kinds of expectations. I did have a great dad. There was some great things that he did and some things I wanted to improve on. So I was really looking forward to experiencing this. And so we got to the day when it was time for my wife to give birth, and I'm not going to go into details other than I may or may not have almost passed out during that time, but we won't talk about that right now. But anyways, this kid was beautiful. He was an amazing kid. Now, I know every baby technically is beautiful, but this one really was. Logan was fantastic. And by the way, his name's Logan. That wasn't his original name that we were going to use. We had decided that his name was going to be Luke. It was completely decided that that's what it was going to be. And then I made the mistake of saying in front of my wife that when he was born, that I would hold my newborn baby in my arms in the delivery room and then say in my best Darth Vader voice, "Luke, I am your father." And that was it. It was done. Luke was gone, and there was Logan. Anyways, Logan's a great name, and we love our Logan. And anyways, he was very, very beautiful, very cute, very precocious, very intelligent. He was able to figure things out very quickly. His problem-solving skills were absolutely amazing. In fact, even when he went into preschool, the things that the The teachers would put into place to keep the children where they were supposed to be. Logan always found a way to get around that. And I remember at one point being in the doctor's office, and as I was waiting for the doctor, I looked at a poster on the back of the door, and it was talking about the number of words that a child should have at certain ages. And so I looked at where the age of Logan was, and saw the number, and then I started counting in my head. Does he have that? And it almost came out exactly what the recommended or the suggested number of words for that age was. And I'm like, well, that's great. I'm so glad that he's developing. Of course, this is our first child, so we don't really know what we're doing, but everything looks really, really good. However, over a period of time, we began to notice some changes. He would get distracted by certain things, especially ceiling fans. They would really get his attention, and he could just stare at them for hours. And we also began to notice that he was losing words that he had. Now, this was hard for us to notice at the time because at this point, Amanda was pregnant with our second child, and it was a difficult time with that. I'm going to get into the details of Abbey in a few minutes, but just to know that during that pregnancy, there was some concerns about Abbey. Some things came up in the ultrasound, and so we had been very worried about that. And then my wife was in a very bad car accident when she was 7 or 8 months pregnant with Abbey. Rolled the car, it landed on its roof, and it was a very bad accident. Amanda was injured, thankfully. Abbey was okay, still in the womb, but we were very concerned about this, and so there was a lot of things that were happening at that time. So we didn't really see things as clearly as we should have. But then we began to notice that those words that Logan had been using just didn't seem to be there. And we were wondering what is going on. And a lot of people around us said, oh, don't worry about it. It's no big deal. But parents have a sense of what is going on and what needs to be checked out. Parents, I believe, are the best experts when it comes to their own children. So we went to our doctor. We had an excellent family doctor. And he did one little test where he clapped his hands behind Logan's head very loudly, and Logan didn't respond. And so he wondered if maybe that Logan was experiencing some hearing loss. And so he sent us for some tests, and it came back that Logan's hearing was perfect. There was no problem at all. So then our doctor decided to send us to a developmental pediatrician. And the purpose of this appointment was to rule out autism. And so we went there, and we spent some time with this doctor who was absolutely excellent. In fact, Logan was fairly affectionate, but he really only hugged myself and my wife. He wasn't that physically affectionate, but for some, especially around people he didn't know, but for some reason he hugged that developmental pediatrician, which was a little bit of a surprise for all of us, I think. But anyways, we went through the test, we answered the questions, spent a lot of time there, and then the pediatrician left the room to discuss with the people that he was working with, and then he came back into the room carrying a box of tissues, and we knew that there was something that was going on. And he explained to us that indeed our son had autism. Now, I really knew almost nothing about autism. Like, my education on autism was The Rain Man, and that's about it. I saw a few other TV shows that had children with autism, and I just pictured kids banging their head and maybe rocking back and forth, and that's about all I had when it came to autism. So I didn't know what we were looking at. I didn't know if this meant that he was just going to be slightly delayed in certain ways, or just was going to be quirky. We really had no idea. And our hope was that he would regain the words that he had lost, And so we just kept on going and hoping that things would get better. And I will mention that it was around this time that that same pediatrician approached us and asked if we would put our daughter Abbey, who was still very young, into a sibling research project because they were trying to develop ways to diagnose autism much earlier than they had been. And they had found that siblings of children with autism were more likely to develop autism. So they wanted the Abby to be in that, not to say that she was going to have autism, but that she would be in the this project, this research project, just to see what was going on. And I'll get back to Abby in a little bit, but that was happening at this time as well. And I remember thinking, well, I'm hearing stories about what it's like for parents with children with autism, and that sometimes they don't really get speaking until maybe the age of 3 or 4 or 5, which is quite a bit later than typical children, but I could wait. I would be patient, and I was looking forward to that time to be able to have a conversation with my son. And yet it just seemed to go on and on and on, that he was just not interested in speaking. And we didn't know what was happening with him. Now, it ended up that he actually was able to speak, or is able to speak. Most of the time, he just chooses not to. Now, why do I say that? The reason I say that is much later, we ended up bringing 3 more children into our home. We actually adopted them, so they're not our biological children. But that, again, is another story to share. And anyways, Logan was sharing a room with his brother Justice. And I had heard, this is around 9:30 at night, that Logan was still awake in his room going through his books. Good man, by the way, to want to spend time in his books. He is definitely like his dad in that way. But anyways, it's getting late for him. He should have been asleep by then. So I went downstairs, and I knew I couldn't just flick off the light, because he would just flick it back on as soon as I left the room. That's the way he would be. So I unscrewed the light bulb from the ceiling, and I heard, "Dad, please turn the light back on." And so I screwed it back on, thinking, oh, that's weird. I didn't know Justice was awake. And I looked over at Justice, and he's sound asleep. And there's Logan looking at me. I'm like, okay, that's really weird. So I unscrewed the light again, and I heard, "Dad, please turn the light back on." And I turned it back on, and there's Logan looking at me, and I'm like, okay. I've never had him speak to me in a sentence before, like maybe he said juice or something like that. But that's about all that was going on. So I was pretty shocked. So I went back upstairs to our bedroom and told my wife, I don't know what's going on, but Logan was talking, and so I gave him a bit more time. And so after a little bit of time, I went back down, shut the light off. He asked me again, but I said, "Thanks for speaking, Logan, but you do need to get some sleep." Now, he doesn't speak in sentences at all, even since then. Every once in a while, it'll just come out. He'll have a sentence that he'll just throw out there, but most of the time, he doesn't. Now, something that's really exciting, this is something that's very fresh, like within the last couple of weeks. And by the way, Logan is 19 years old now. He still doesn't speak in sentences. But just recently, in the last couple of weeks, we have decided to try email, because Logan is able to type out complex searches on the internet. He can do Google searches. He could do YouTube searches. And so I know that he knows how to read. I know that he knows how to type. And so we decided to try email. And so we are actually emailing back and forth now. And we're, for the first time, having conversations with each other. If you can imagine, at the age of 19, your first time having conversation with your child, it is pretty pretty wild. One of the challenges that we had with Logan is that he was a runner. For some reason, he would get stressed out while outside and sometimes while he was inside, and he would just start running. He would take off. He would escape from our house. We actually had times where, because our bedroom was on the second floor, and his bedroom was on the first floor near our front door to get out, he had access to that. And if he didn't fall asleep right away, he might get out during the night. So there were times in our life where we actually had to barricade the door. We would put boxes and all kinds of other things in front of the door because we had to keep him safe. There was a time when I sat down in the living room. Our living room is on the second floor as well. I sat down after putting the kids to bed, and I looked out the front window, and there was Logan running down our driveway. And there was a number of times that the police were involved, and it was very, very difficult. Eventually, Logan went into a group home, and we didn't think that would happen until he was an adult. But once puberty came, that really seemed to affect him a lot, and there were some very, very difficult behaviors. It just was not going to be working. And so I'll share about that again, maybe in a different video. But I'll just say that he did go into a group home, and they knew that he was a runner. And there was one group home he was at where they unfortunately left him outside by himself to wait for the school bus. The school bus had been a little bit late, so they just left him out there. And that was just the stupidest thing to do. I hesitate to use harsh language like that, but it really was. And so he took off. And it was an hour and a half later before they called us and let us know that he was missing. We got there. There were police cars all up and down the street. There was the K-9 unit. There was a news van to report on the very possible tragedy that was about to have taken place or about to be discovered. And so we were just absolutely panicked. We talked to the police officer and found out that the group home had said that he was very low functioning, couldn't do very much, so they had focused their search within a couple of blocks radius. And we explained that he was actually very high functioning, very intelligent. He didn't communicate well, but he was very intelligent, and he was able to do a lot of things. And the police officer said, well, that's completely opposite of what they told us. Anyways, we found out that he actually walked to school. Now, that might not sound like a big deal, but his school was in the next city, 9 kilometers away. And of course, he had never walked that way before. He'd always taken a bus, but he had memorized the route from taking the bus. And he was found just as he showed up at the school. And so it was absolutely amazing. When we saw him, we found out that he was there and he was safe. We had totally mixed feelings. On one hand, we were really mad that he had taken off like that. On the other hand, we were really proud that he had been able to do that. He had shown no safety awareness. I had seen him run in front of cars before, and he had to cross many, many very busy streets to get to his school. And he got there, which is absolutely incredible. And so that's part of what was going on. Now I'm going to go back in time a bit to our daughter, Abbey. Now, Abbey was different than Logan and is different than Logan in many ways. There are similarities. She, like Logan, is nonverbal, and she would be what's considered on the severe end of the autism spectrum. But there are other differences. We always saw that Logan seemed to be content in his own world, while Abbey was miserable in our world. So Logan could kind of zone out. He would look at the fans, or he would do what's called stimming to just kind of deal with reality. Abbey was much more present, but she got more angry. She got upset a lot, and there was a lot more behaviors. In fact, she ended up having to go into a group home at the age of 7. Now, Logan went in at 13. It was at the age of 7 that Abbey went in. Now, can you imagine having to send your child to live away from you at the age of 7? She's 17 now, so that's well over half her age has been spent in a group home, and that was very, very difficult. And I will share about that in a different video, because I think that that's a story for its own. But that was really, really hard for us, and she went through some really difficult times. She was very violent. It was really important that certain things be in a certain way, and any slight changes would cause her to absolutely flip out. Now, it's not a temper tantrum, it's called a meltdown. There's a difference between a meltdown and a temper tantrum. A temper tantrum is just someone getting frustrated, they're not getting their own way, and they're going to cause a fuss until they get it. A meltdown is beyond their control. They're not able to do that. It is a complete overwhelming of the things that are happening around them, and they cannot choose to do that. You cannot just tell a child who's having a meltdown, just stop having a meltdown. And you can't even bribe them. Once they're in the midst of the meltdown, it just has to run its course. And that happened a lot, and it was so difficult. And it happened in the group home as well. Now, thankfully, Logan and Abbey are in the same group home now, not the group home that let him stand outside by himself, but in an excellent group home. And there's been a lot of joy and a lot of difficulty in our experience there as parents of children with autism. The difficulty is that as they got older, the gap between them and their peers got wider and wider. So at first, they're just a little bit off, a little bit crankier, not talking as much. But with each year, it would get more and more that they would become different from their peers. And then we start to hit the milestones that we completely take for granted. So, you look forward to your child turning 16 and being eligible to getting a driver's license, but that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen with them. That's not where they're at. So there was a grieving process there. There was a grieving process when Logan turned 18, and Abbey will be turning 18 soon, becoming adults and seeing that they are in a completely different place. When they get to the age when you're supposed to be graduating from high school, where we live, children with developmental disabilities are able to stay in high school till the age of 21. So many of their peers are perhaps finishing college or well on their way to finishing university, and our children are still in high school and will be for some time yet. So these are some of the difficulties that we've had to go through. There was a real grieving that happened. There was a loss of dreams of what we would expect. Some of it being just basic things, like to be able just to have a regular conversation with your child, just to say, hey, how was your day? How are you doing? Is everything going okay? And those conversations are very difficult. It was a total game changer when Logan developed the ability to, or at least the willingness, to answer yes or no questions. That really changed things. So we couldn't necessarily say, how are you feeling? But we could say to him, Logan, are you happy? Yes or no? And he would tell us which one it was. And that really changed things. And now, as I mentioned, we're starting to email, and that's changing things again. But there are a lot of difficulties. And Abbey's not at that point yet to be able to do those things. She doesn't have the yes-no or the email capability yet. But she's come along in a lot of ways as well. They're just different. And that's something that's really important, something I try to get across every time I talk about autism. If you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. Logan and Abbey, even though they're considered to be on the same end of the spectrum, are very different from each other. And you should never just assume because you know one person with autism that you know what the next person with autism is going to be like, because they could be completely different. And it's important for you to keep that in mind. So there has been some difficult times, but there's been some great times as well. I remember saying to my wife that the thing that really was difficult about having children with autism that we wouldn't never hear them say to us that they love us. And I remember coming back from church after a Christmas Eve service when we were putting Logan and Abbey to bed, and I told Logan that I loved him, and he looked at me and he told me he loved me, and that was a miracle for us. And we've had a number of major things like that happen, ways that they have done things that have just been just blown our mind, and we have just a tremendous relationship with them. Even though it's hard that they're in a group home, we actually have a much better relationship with them because of that, because we don't have to deal with some of the most difficult things that take place, that we can just enjoy. We can enjoy them on our visits. We can spend quality time with them and have a good relationship with them. So there is a lot of good things that happen. I would never want you just to pity a parent of a child or children with autism. Find out what's going on. They're going to be just like any other parent in some ways, in that there's a mix of good things that happen and there's a mix of bad things that happen. It just, the good things look different and the bad things look different, but it's still that same mix. I don't even know if it's easier being a parent of children with autism or a parent of children without autism, because my other children certainly give me my fair share of gray hair. Maybe not up here, but definitely down here. So that's a little bit of my experience as an autism dad, and I actually like to dive into this a little bit more in future videos and share other aspects of what it's like. But I hope that that gives you just a little glimpse of what my experience has been like. And please don't assume that the next autism dad that you talk to, that they've had the same experience, because it could be completely different. Well, thank you for watching this video, and I would encourage you to go to my website, stephenjbedard.com, and you will find on that website a link to my Disability and Faith blog, and that's where I blog on different aspects of disabilities. Sometimes it's about autism, sometimes it's the wider concept of disability, but I encourage you to check that out. And also I would like you to check out one of my books, one of the books that I'm most proud of, and it's How to Make Your Church Autism Friendly. And I would encourage you to check that out. It actually shares a lot of the stuff I talked about here, our experience with children with autism, and more that I haven't talked about here. And then it also gives some hints on how your church can become autism friendly and be welcoming and inclusive of people with autism, not just children, but all people with autism. So you can find that on Amazon in Kindle or paperback, but I would encourage you to check it out. It might be the resource that you need. Thanks again, and God bless each one of you.